Hey, I'm Tyler Van Haren, an engineer here at Statsig, and today we're going to be talking about getting started with initializing your SDK for server SDKs. In particular, in this one, I'm going to be using Node as my sort of example, but concepts apply to broadly all of our server SDKs. And so I've got a really simple React app here that just makes a request to basically the most straightforward backend you can have. And we're going to start making use of Statsig in this backend just to modify sort of what message we're sending back. So the first thing that you want to do as part of making use of Statsig is actually go ahead and get it installed. In particular, for me, I just did an npm install for the Statsig node package. Use sort of the corresponding guide there, of course. And once you actually have that installed, you can go ahead and initialize the SDK. And so once I've gone ahead and installed the Statsig SDK, I can go ahead and start making use of it in my my app. In particular, I'm obviously going to want to sort of get it imported, but then I can also go ahead and start initializing. So that will look something like this, just calling this await initialize. So await statsig.initialize. Generally speaking, this is something you're going to want to do on sort of server spin-up as part of that process. Here I'm sort of hackily initializing on request. The other thing that you'll want to do sort of correctly is actually do proper secret management. For this particular demo purposes, I'm just going to take my key and paste it in directly. Of course, do not do this with your actual secrets. Do your proper secret management services. I'll just deactivate this one after this demo. But I'm going to go ahead and initialize the Statsig SDK and say, hey, this is my SDK key. That SDK key is really important, really valuable, because it lets us know what configs to actually go ahead and give you. While our client SDKs, it's one user at a time, so we can actually do a lot of storing, hey, this user has these values for these gates. For your server SDKs, like, we're expecting you to have many different users making requests, etc. It's not tied to one user. To handle that, we go ahead and actually download all of the rules you need to evaluate locally to your servers. So that's kind of like the secret sauce of how all of your evaluations work, and that's why you want to be sort of protective of it. We're going to go ahead and initialize with that, and now that I'm initialized, further initializes are actually just going to be sort of no ops. So it's not the worst case scenario, but like adds a weird latency to this request. So do it correctly, do it on server startup. The other thing that we're going to need in order to actually go ahead and check a gate, and I've gone ahead and made a gate here that we'll use called show new backend message. And we're going to say, who is our user? This is something that will usually be coming from your requests, or you're maybe adding additional authenticated information to the object, the request, and you're going to be making use of that to know like what sort of targeting can you do, who is this person, if I'm rolling something out partially, what does that look like, things like that. In this case, I'm again going to do something super simplistic here and just say like, yeah, my user ID is 1234, something like that, and now I have a user that I'm going to use for answering this. Now that I have a user, now that I have a gate, I can go ahead and actually use the gate. So do something like, it's actually pretty good. Should I use a new message? And that will just check the gate. Whatever I called it, show new backend message, and then pass in that user object. In that user object, I could also put all sorts of other information. If I have an email that I want to be able to target off of, I could add the email included in it. If I have other things that I am super interested in, like what country the user is in, or things like that, I can make use of that here as well. There's also a field called custom that will allow you to add sort of anything you want to target off of. Common example here is something like subscriber. Is this a person who should have access to special features that maybe normal people shouldn't have? you could put that in here too and say, yeah, subscriber. Maybe this user is not a subscriber. And now I could roll out things based on that status too. For a lot of this is going to be stuff that you're fetching from your other servers, memoizing, etc., and having on your user object. And so now that I have my user object, now that I have the actual SDK initialized, I can go ahead and make use of checkGate and say like, yep, I'm checking a gate for this user and I'm checking this gate. I can check any of my gates here now and actually just get back that Boolean. Do they pass, do they fail that gate? Should they have or not have that feature or that new version of the feature, etc. I can go ahead and make use of that show new message here. And in this case, if they fail, I'm going to return my current message of the messages coming from the backend. And if they pass, I'm going to return this new message. So now that you're checking your gate, one other thing that you might want to do, depending on sort of the setup of your server, is manually flush. For really long running servers, this is probably not a huge issue. If you're using Statsig in the concept of like a script or in the concept of potentially even like a Lambda, it's useful to call flush at the end. By default, we'll be flushing every 10 seconds. We'll try to flush on shutdown as well, just to get all of those events of who saw what gates, who checked what gates, etc., sent over to you. But if you're in a like sort of very short living environment that ends very abruptly, you'll potentially want to do something like manually call flush here as well, just to make sure the events get our way. Now, when I go and actually check my app, I'm, in this case, getting back that message coming from the backend on account of it not letting anyone through. If I go over to diagnostics, I should actually be able to see things coming through as well. Yeah, true. It does have no rules. I'll be able to see, yep, that was an earlier evaluation, but now I'll be able to see that false come through. Someone checked this, they got back false. The reason they got back false was because there's no rules, so it will return false by default. I can go ahead and add rules on top of it. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and let everyone through. Every single user is allowed into this gate. And now when I go back over to my application, in about 10 seconds or so, I should see this kick in. It will take low single-digit seconds for Statsig to propagate out this information to sort of our global knowledge. And then your server is likely polling every 10 seconds for updates. So again, in about 10 seconds, I see that now I passed that gate. I get the new message from the backend. If I go over to diagnostics, I should see a new exposure. Honestly, probably is very similar to this one because I had that rule in there earlier where I see, yep, for user 1234, they checked this gate, they got back true. The reason they got back true is because they passed that everyone rule. If I did something like set this gate to 50% of users, now 50% of user IDs would start passing instead of 100% or 0%. That's sort of the basics of getting up and running with Statsig on the server side. Yeah, stay tuned for more videos and enjoy Statsigging. Thanks.